Thank you very much, Alex, and it's a pleasure to be on the panel with you, dear Excellencies. As Alex mentioned, I have kind of two different heads, and the head I'm taking on today will be speaking from the experience of many individuals who are part of the network of the Geneva Peacebuilding platform. A network of about 4,000 individuals who are involved in peace mediation, peace building, and other types of dialogue and negotiation approaches in pretty much all different types of conflict situations on all continents. So what I would like to share is not very much my vision or my understanding of where there is a synergy between peace building and development, but just share with you some of the perspectives which I understand are the perspectives from those individuals who are working exactly on the ground which Ambassador Gallego just emphasized. That peace building, conflict, interfaith happens somewhere. So what I would like to share with you is perhaps a grounds-up perspective on these issues. And focusing on also where are these synergies on these peace building and development angle, which is part of the title. So essentially I will focus on two elements of these synergies. First, that these synergies grow from a similar set of challenges. Many of those have already been mentioned here. And the other one is that they are building on a similar set of operational approaches. So when we are looking at the similar set of challenges that peace building and peace mediation or peace building actors on the ground face, many reflect the views that have been so adequately shared just a year and a half ago when Peter Maurer, the president of the ICRC, and the then Secretary General Ban Ki-moon had a joint press conference in Geneva, where Peter Maurer said, "We have reached a new era, and it is not a peaceful one." End of citation. What many individuals from the ground up and those involved in conflict situation, be that in cities, between rebel groups, between governmental forces, between all types of different armed forces, they perceive that conflict and conflict risk is increasing faster than the solutions to them. Now, we know that this is the result of a number of risk factors, from the effects of climate change, rapid urbanization, power shifts, the badly managed foreign direct investments, and a whole sorts of other issues that Ambassador Gallegos already alluded to. But one thing where development and peace-building practitioners are essentially have a common ground, that all of these effects are felt locally. So, on the one hand, perhaps from a developmental perspective, they affect the quality of life of people, and from a peace-building perspective, they increase conflict and the risk of conflict. Now, if this is the first trend that makes up the channels, that the conflict and conflict risk is increasing faster than the solutions, then there is another trend that many actors on the ground are observing, which is the trend towards a non-state world. While in the United Nations, and particularly in the United Nations system, there is still a very heavy bias of state interaction. From the ground up, many individuals perceive that a lot of what happens de facto on the ground is not necessarily driven by states, but possibly by the absence of states. In the words of one business representative that I met, who is in fact running a multi-billion-dollar project in a country in Africa, he described this phenomenon as, yes, we have to comply to the laws of that country, but we know that as soon as we leave the capital, another set of laws, regulation, and norms is taking over. So we have to do both. We have to comply to the local norms and the local rules and the localized norms, and of course respect the laws of the country. And I think this comment reflects, in one way or the other, that clash between the de jure and the de facto world that many practitioners in the peace building and peace mediation and conflict resolution world are facing. How they express it, very much in the way of in the coexistence of state and other kind of power holders, and that very frequently there are very blurred lines between who is really a government official, who is a business person, who is civil society, and who is involved in all sorts of illicit activities. So the in this murky environment reflects a lot of the operation ground of peace building and development actors and those who act on the front lines in order to provide humanitarian assistance and increase the quality of life of people in the most dismal environments. Now, a most recent aspect that is part of this trend, this trend towards a non-state world, is the pushback. And this pushback is particularly felt by individuals who are perceiving this as an increasing trend toward authoritarianism. Now, both the trend towards the non-state world and the pushback to it has a similar effect as what we have said already earlier, which is that the effects are felt locally, which in the sense that they affect the quality of life and they increase the risk of conflict and the occurrence of conflict. Now, these are some of the broader elements which are shaping the synergies between development and peace-building actors. But when we are wanting to get concrete, what do actors who are working on the ground say with respect to what can be really done in terms of a process of negotiated development and in the process of effectively reducing conflict and violence? The first one is that development and peace is never implemented and never driven by any single actor on its own. It is co-produced. So particularly when we are looking at the language of the Sustainable Development Goals, one can really consider a localized approach where peaceful and just and inclusive societies are co-produced. And there are very simple steps from a peace-building perspective that this entails, which is that there is a collaborative analysis of what the problem or what the conflict risks are, which is a focus on the partisan interests of all actors involved in conflict and violence, which is that there is a constantly expanding coalitions for change that is managed, and that there are spaces to engage and talk to all actors involved in the conflict systems, both in the locality where the conflict occurs and in the international centers that also drive local conflict dynamics. And this brings me to a point where, of course, a Geneva angle comes in here, which is we are blessed for those who work on peace and peace-building issues in Geneva, that this is possibly the only city in the world that has second or third degree channels of communication to any armed actor in the world, where through network connections you can assist a lot in reducing violence, in providing humanitarian dialogue and access, which are so important to provide the cornerstones for development in the aftermath of conflict, or also to improve the quality of life just a little bit in situations which are really dismal. Now, all of this comes to say that when there is an emphasis of localization, really having strategies that are place-based and context-specific, it does not mean that the only activity focus is on the local level, and that many peace-building actors are very aware of, where there are bigger power agendas and bigger commercial agendas that interplay into local conflicts, of course. But where there is perhaps, and I will close with this, a very fundamental opportunity to make that nexus expand from the peace-building and development angle also to include the faith aspect, is the to emphasize the issue of transformation. Because both peace-building and development are essentially transformative processes. And a lot of international practice or analysis has always focused on the transformation of objective conditions. But where there is really a lot of opportunity here is to focus on the transformative capability and opportunity of individuals and groups, be they armed or non-armed. Because the boxing in of different groups in different categories and labels is very often a limitation for transformation. And faith-based orientations, faith-based ethic and mental models, particularly those, as was previously mentioned, that are emphasizing the non-violent efforts of relationship building between communities and individuals, are one of the few ethical and moral frames that can really help actors that have been involved in armed groups and also in government forces to transform into another state of being. So this is, I think, focusing on the transformative notion of getting armed actors and also those involved in the conflict situation into another state is something where there is a lot of prospect to promote the synergies between peace-building development and faith-based action. With these words, I will close, and I thank again the organizers for having me, and I'm looking forward to next year already. Thank you.